I'm gonna put this down because if I don't stop, I'm gonna eat the whole thing. And then another piece. And then another piece. And then another piece. And another piece. So... So today we're gonna make a chocolate cake, but we're not gonna just make any chocolate cake. It's a 1-bowl chocolate cake, so it's incredibly easy. It's very quick to put together. It's insanely delicious, and the topping, well, let's just say you might need to ration it because it's so good you might eat the whole thing from the bowl before it gets on the cake. So, before we get started, the first thing we need to do, because this is a 1-bowl chocolate cake, we need to make sure that all your ingredients are weighed out, your oven is preheated, and your baking tray is ready. So this is a regular 9x13 brownie pan, and all I've done is lightly greased it, and I've lined it with a strip of parchment. Now what you can see is that there's a little excess hanging over the edge, and that's because a big cake like this is quite hard to maneuver, so having those strips means it's just a lot easier to take out. So the first thing we want to do for the cake is sieve our dry goods together, and that's mainly to get rid of any lumps in the brown sugar and the cocoa powder, which have a tendency to clump. So just pass that through the sieve, using your hands just to press everything through to get rid of any lumps. Now because the sieve doesn't really combine everything, we're then just going to give everything a brief whisk just to make sure everything is nicely combined. Now we're just going to add a little bit of vanilla to our oil and to our sour cream, mixing that together, and then just add the eggs and whisk that through as well. And that is basically it. All we're gonna do now is add our liquid goods to our dry goods and bring that together. So pour in the egg mixture, pour in the hot coffee, and then just whisk that together, making sure that we scrape the sides of the bowl to make sure that everything is nice and evenly combined and there's no pockets of flour hiding anywhere. And now all we do is pour that into the prepared tin, and now we're just gonna pop that in the oven. It really is that simple, it really is that quick, and to be honest, you probably have most of the ingredients in your kitchen already. It's one of those wonderful cakes that say someone's coming over, or you've forgotten to make a birthday cake, or you have just a general Friday chocolate cake emergency, because that is a thing, we all need a chocolate cake on a Friday. You have most of these ingredients in, so it's a really nice, quick and easy cake to make. Now, whilst the cake is in the oven, we can go ahead and make the ganache frosting because that takes a little bit of time. Now, I can't state this strongly enough. This ganache is so delicious. You're gonna wanna put it on everything. So, obviously what we're gonna need is some milk chocolate. And I'm using these little wafers of chocolate just because you don't have to chop them, much easier, and it melts nice and evenly. But then what we're gonna do instead of making a classic ganache just with some cream, is we're gonna add this cream to some caramel and make a caramel milk chocolate ganache. And it's so delicious. So what we're gonna do is take our sugar, we're gonna add it to a pan, and then over a medium heat, we're gonna cook it until it turns the color of like a rusty penny. So really nice and coppery, really dark, just before it starts to smoke. So this method is what's known as a dry caramel because we're not adding any water to the pan. We're just adding sugar and that's it. I think this is personally the easiest method because we don't have to worry too much about crystallization. But some people find it more nerve-wracking to do this because it's just hot sugar in a pan. So if you do prefer a wet caramel, you could absolutely do that. Just add enough water to moisten the sugar and then cook it as the same. It'll just take a little bit longer to caramelize. So as the caramel gets near to being ready, we need to make sure that we have our other ingredients nearby because it will go from perfectly caramelized to burnt very quickly. So have everything nearby. Then what we're gonna do is add our butter. That's gonna fizzle up a little bit. We're then gonna add some salt. That's gonna help balance the sweetness, but also give us that real delicious caramel flavor. Then what we're gonna do is add our cream in about 2 additions. If we add it too quickly, it might bubble up and over the pan, so we wanna do this nice and slowly. It also helps if your cream is a little bit warm. If you add cold cream to the caramel, you're gonna end up with lumps, and what you'll have to do is turn the heat down and just keep stirring it until those lumps disappear. That's fine, it's just a little bit annoying, so if you can, warm up your cream before you get started. So once we have our caramel, which is nice and delicious, we're gonna add just a little bit of vanilla bean paste. So we're just gonna take that, add it in, stir that together. And then all we can do is pour that over the chocolate to make our ganache. And then we're just gonna leave that for a couple of minutes before we stir that together to make a nice silky ganache. So once we have our delicious caramel ganache, we're gonna pop that in the fridge for a while because at the moment it's too loose to whip and we don't want to get it too firm, so we don't leave it in the freezer for hours and hours, otherwise we're gonna have to bring it back to room temperature. We're just gonna leave it in there for a little while so that we can whip it and give it that beautiful, almost whipped cream-like texture. So after about 25 minutes, you can tell it's done just by gently pressing on the cake. It'll spring back to your touch and it'll also be pulling away from the sides just a little bit. So once the cake has cooled for about half an hour, this is where our little overhang of parchment really comes in handy. So what we're gonna do is just gently lift both strips up at the same time and then transfer the cake. And that means we don't damage it too much and we can let it cool completely until we're ready to frost it. So once our cake is nice and cooled and our ganache has thickened really beautifully, we can get on with decorating the cake. Now all we're gonna do for our ganache is just lightly whisk it until it becomes like almost a buttercream texture, and this isn't going to take very long. You can do this with a balloon whisk by hand, but it's a little bit stiff, so it might be a little bit difficult. So just a regular old hand mixer will work for this absolutely fine. The one thing you want to make sure you don't do is whisk it too long because then it will go grainy. So stop as soon as it becomes nice and billowy and kind of the texture of an Italian or Swiss meringue buttercream. So once our ganache is whipped to this really beautiful kind of pale milk chocolate caramel colour, what we're going to do is spread that all over the sheet cake, giving it lots of nice swoops and swirls so it looks really pretty. Now it would be delicious as it is, but we're going to do a couple of extra things just to amp up the flavour a little bit. The first is we're going to add some of these delicious cocoa nibs, and that's just going to give the cake a really nice depth of chocolate flavour and a little bit of crunch as well. And for another level of crunch, and to turn this cake into a kind of Snickers vibe cake, we're going to sprinkle the cake with some salted peanuts. We don't want too much because we don't want it super salty. We want to get that really nice mix of sweet and salty. And because there's caramel in the chocolate, it's going to give us that kind of delicious Snickers vibe. So that is the finished chocolate sheet cake with a whipped caramel ganache. It's so good. I implore you to run to your kitchens and make this immediately because everyone who has tried this has eaten way more than they should, and I think I'm gonna go have some alone time with this cake because it's just amazing. It's so delicious. As always, the recipe is up in the corner or in the box down below. If there's anything else you want to see me make in an upcoming video, leave me a comment down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe because I make new baking videos every single week.